Without food or even clothes, a skateboarding girl and a hunter face the challenge of surviving 21 days together in the perilous jungles of Nicaragua's Isabel Mountains at an altitude of 760 meters. The area is home to deadly fer-de-lance snakes and large cougars that can weigh up to 80 kilograms and leap at prey from 6 meters away. Jacqueline, 25 years old and a vegetarian for 2 years, has been practicing skateboarding barefoot to prepare for this 21-day wilderness survival challenge. She wonders if a vegetarian diet will sustain her until the end. Adam, 29, a professional hunting guide with special expertise in crocodiles, claims to understand the language of crocodiles. Before the challenge, his grandmother expressed a hope that the girl joining her grandson would be unattractive, humorously noting her deep understanding of her grandson. Jacqueline is currently single and somewhat uncomfortable with nudity, while Adam, who has a girlfriend, acknowledges her likely discomfort with the situation, but emphasizes that the necessities of food, water, and shelter are more important than sexual attraction. Both participants were shy upon meeting, speaking only a few words after an awkward initial encounter. Each contestant chooses one survival tool, Jacqueline with a fire starter, and Adam with a machete, typical choices for such challenges. They are dropped deep in the mountains, planning to build a shelter near a river close to a waterfall. The jungle's hidden dangers will test Adam's hunting skills and both their survival abilities. Experts have rated their primitive survival skills, PSR, based on skills, experience, and psychological factors. Adam's score is 7.3, boosted by his tracking and hunting skills, but limited by his lack of experience in jungle environments. Jacqueline's score is 7.1. Her plant identification skills being a strong point, though her vegetarian diet might hinder her protein intake during the challenge. On their way to find a suitable site for their shelter, Adam suggests that Jacqueline make some clothing for sun protection, reaffirming his commitment to his girlfriend and his primary goal of surviving 21 days. As they rush to finish their shelter by 5 p.m., rain begins to fall, and temperatures drop, forcing them to huddle together for warmth. On the second day, the sun shone down on the earth. Jacqueline successfully started a fire with her fire starter. Adam used bamboo as a container to hold water, then boiled it. The clear river water was not far from the camp, convenient yet challenging due to the lack of dry wood, which kept the fire too weak to boil the water in the bamboo. Many lessons have taught us not to easily drink raw water from the wild. By 5 p.m., Adam, parched, asked Jacqueline if they could drink directly from the waterfall. "Definitely not below," he said. Adam planned for them to rest well today and climb to the top of the waterfall tomorrow to drink. This plan would require a lot of energy, as Adam and Jacqueline had to climb 5 kilometers to reach above the waterfall. During the journey, Jacqueline had to stop multiple times to rest and even started feeling faint. Just 2.5 days into the 21-day challenge, they hadn't drunk any water. When they were only 1.6 kilometers away from a safe water source, Jacqueline showed signs of organ failure and early symptoms of acute dehydration. She barely made it up. Eventually, Jacqueline followed Adam and found a relatively safe water source. After hydrating, she felt much better and was grateful for the tough climb. She appreciated Adam's constant encouragement and emotional support, emphasizing the importance of a patient teammate to avoid conflicts. On the 4th day, with his energy still decent, Adam went out hunting. Meanwhile, Jacqueline collected some edible plants. At noon, Adam returned with 2 crabs, 2 snails, and an earthworm. Although not a feast, it was a delicacy for wilderness survival. Remember, Jacqueline is a vegetarian. She was surprised to see Adam enjoying the roasted snails, as she wouldn't even touch meat, let alone snails and worms. Adam didn't force Jacqueline to eat, knowing that in a few days, when she was extremely hungry, she would likely eat. The caloric difference between their first meals was significant. Jacqueline's food totaled at most 30 calories, while Adam's intake was at least 4 times hers. Most people need about 2,000 calories a day. Over the next 3 days, Adam and Jacqueline continued to forage for food separately. The weather gradually dried up, allowing them to boil water near the camp. However, the nightly cold still forced them to sleep close together. At such times, hearing strange noises was the last thing they wanted, especially with nearby cougars posing the greatest threat. On the night of the 8th day, they heard the roar of cougars around them. On the morning of day 9, they were still shaken. Adam decided to make a weapon, His skills mainly involve identifying and tracking wild animals. Whenever he enters a new environment in the jungle, Adam can identify potential threats. Now, feeling threatened by cougars, he decided to patrol the area with his homemade weapon. After inspecting, he found numerous cougar tracks near the camp. They hadn't intruded on the cougars' territory. Instead, they had encroached upon it. Fortunately, while gathering food, Jacqueline discovered a hidden small cave ideal for shelter. After discussing with Adam, they promptly moved there. On the way, Adam caught a highly venomous lance-head snake with a stick. Jacqueline continued her vegetarian diet, so Adam ate alone at night. The only downside of the new cave was the abundance of bugs, making it hard to sleep at night. Jacqueline was bitten all over and felt irritable, especially since she was also on her period. Jacqueline maintained her vegetarian diet until day 17, but couldn't continue due to hunger. That day, Adam caught a small lizard. Unwilling to be hospitalized for starvation and to ensure the challenge's success, Jacqueline had no choice but to eat. From day one, Adam and Jacqueline got along harmoniously, just like the episode's title, Jungle Dependence. Jacqueline mentioned that if they met again, they could travel and adventure together. A hunter and a vegetarian, a fine pairing indeed. Finally, on day 21, they faced the perilous 10-kilometer descent. They had to navigate steep rocks and snake-infested streams before finding a small road. A truck loaded with bananas picked them up there, marking the end of their challenge. Throughout the 21 days, Adam lost 22 pounds and Jacqueline lost 16 pounds. Adam's excellent hunting skills helped them obtain essential protein. Jacqueline also proved she could make tough decisions for survival, like eating meat. Her rating increased from 7.1 to 7.5, and Adam's from 7.3 to 7.8. Harsh high temperatures and dangerous sharks are the biggest threats to the two challengers. The male contestant we see now is Jonathan, a 36-year-old from California. He was a Marine Corps scout and sniper and continues to keep fit after retirement. Jonathan has also competed in 8 triathlons, so he confidently says, "I don't mind being naked because I'm in great shape." The female contestant cheering at the site of the island is Allison, a 27-year-old surfer and survival expert. She describes herself as wild and adventurous, having visited some of the most remote and unique places on Earth. Allison doesn't mind the harsh environment, but she is a bit shy about being naked with her partner. She reveals that her former nickname was Nun, indicating her conservative nature. It's a common feeling to be embarrassed, unless you're as confident about your body as Jonathan. Jonathan immediately felt the pain of the sun on his skin after stripping, as he burns easily. Allison couldn't help but giggle as she approached him, feeling embarrassed by the unusual situation. After a brief and awkward exchange of greetings, they examined their survival tools. Jonathan chose a hand axe, while Allison opted for a fire starter, ensuring that starting a fire wouldn't be an issue. Besides their own cameras, a professional film crew is documenting their journey. These experienced photographers are used to capturing such scenes. Looking at the local map, there are 2 islands. The smaller one is where they landed, and the larger one, 1.6 kilometers away, is rich in resources. To survive 21 days, they must swim over, facing strong currents between the islands. Allison worries about encountering sharks, while Jonathan is concerned about sunburn in the sea. Although Allison is skilled at surfing and was not initially afraid of sharks, a close encounter with a 5.8-meter weasel shark changed her perspective. Their fear in the ocean is profound. This is not like swimming in an indoor pool. In the sea, they are completely unequipped and even lack clothing, truly embodying the fear of being naked. They made it to the larger island across the channel. Before the challenge, experts assessed the survival skills of both participants. Jonathan's military background was seen as an advantage, but his lack of social skills was a significant disadvantage. Allison's comprehensive survival skills and experience with various cultures worldwide were her strengths, though her lack of experience interacting with military personnel could lead to potential conflicts. Jonathan scored 6.9, and Allison scored 8.0. The experts pointed out Jonathan's poor social skills and Allison's potential difficulty in collaborating with a hardcore military man as their respective flaws. Upon starting the challenge, Jonathan's skin was already sunburnt, highlighting his sensitivity to the sun. Surprisingly, he lay down almost immediately, incapacitated by his sunburn on the very first day, which seemed rather negative. Fortunately, Allison was proactive. While Jonathan was unable to move, she took charge, keeping busy throughout. Jonathan considered quitting due to his severe sunburn, despite being a survival expert and veteran. If he gave up, Allison would have to survive the remaining 18 days alone. However, Jonathan persisted the next day, determined not to quit, despite his pain. Allison tried to help by applying herbal remedies to his burns, though they were ultimately ineffective. Yet this act showed mutual care between the partners. As Jonathan struggled, Allison took on the responsibility of finding coconuts and ingeniously crafted a sunshade to prevent further sunburn. Their primary water source was coconut water, but excessive consumption could lead to dehydration due to its diuretic effect. While Allison worked hard gathering coconuts, Jonathan criticized her for not searching for fresh water, which seemed unfair given his lack of contribution. Allison handled everything from collecting coconuts to improving their shelter and fishing, all on her own. By day 6, Allison could no longer cope due to menstrual cramps in the harsh environment. Meanwhile, Jonathan's sunburn had somewhat improved. Realizing he couldn't just lie around any longer, he started searching for fresh water. After digging in one spot with a hatchet for several days, he finally struck water. The water was murky and ideally needed to be filtered and boiled before drinking. They had flint for making fire, which made boiling water convenient. However, Jonathan, in his impatience, drank the water directly. This was a mistake, as he soon suffered from diarrhea. To make matters worse, he chose to relieve himself near their shelter, attracting a lot of flies and creating a foul smell. Allison stepped in it on her way back to the shelter and realized it was Jonathan's doing. This embarrassing incident was also going to be broadcast on their show. Allison gently advised him to relieve himself further away and cover it with sand. Jonathan, upset by the situation, retorted that he couldn't help having diarrhea. The argument over this issue was their most intense yet, straining their relationship. Allison even exclaimed that he lacked the skills to survive there. On day 13, while fishing together, Allison bravely killed an eel with a hatchet, crying as she did so because she disliked killing. Jonathan, seeing her bravery, admitted that despite his military background, Allison was more proactive and better suited to lead their survival efforts. Determined to contribute, Jonathan later managed to catch a clam by himself. By day 19, the eel and clam were their only sources of protein. They endured a storm as temperatures dropped sharply, making their final days particularly dangerous. Nevertheless, they successfully completed the challenge. Over these 21 days, Jonathan lost 8 kilos, Allison lost 6 kilos. Let's review the changes in their scores. Jonathan demonstrated great determination when injured, enduring despite not being very active, and increased his score from 6.9 to 7.3. Allison needs no extra mention. She raised her score from 8.0 to 8.4, a very high score. This season's challenge took place in the rainforests of Central America, Costa Rica. Before the challenge started, the show's producer, Steve, was scouting the site when he was bitten by a fer-de-lance snake. The venom quickly spread throughout his body. The crew quickly airlifted him to a local hospital where he underwent multiple surgeries and narrowly survived. After this serious incident, the production team and the contestants discussed whether to continue the challenge. Both participants hesitated, but decided to proceed. The first to appear this season was Shane, a 40-year-old survival enthusiast. Shane grew up without his parents, spending 13 years in foster homes and boarding schools. The school took them on a wilderness survival trip, which unleashed a sense of freedom in Shane he had never felt before, leading him to fall in love with adventure. The female contestant this season is Jim, a 22-year-old survival instructor. Jim is academically trained with little actual wilderness experience. Seeing how thin Jim is, concerns arise since survival usually relies on fat reserves. Upon arriving at the challenge site, it was time to disrobe. Shane, being 40, expressed concerns about communicating properly with his 22-year-old partner. Jim's biggest worry was that her partner might be arrogant. Their initial meeting was filled with awkward and nervous small talk. Let's see what tools they brought. Shane brought a fire-starting tool. Jim brought a machete. Along with their cameras, a film crew followed them throughout, intervening only in case of emergencies. Now let's look at the map of the area, a deep canyon covered in rainforest with a river winding through it. They relied on the sun for direction. aiming to cross the rainforest and set up camp near the river. After surviving 21 days, they planned to reach a waterfall a few kilometers downstream. Compared to previous episodes on islands and prairies, surviving in the rainforest poses significant challenges, including the fear of the unknown. Just finding the river could lead to getting lost and a prolonged search. Fortunately, they had a map. Let's look at the initial survival ratings for the two participants based on skills, experience, and psychology. Shane scored 7.6. Jim, lacking practical experience, scored 5.8. During the challenging journey to the river, Shane kept the conversation going to lighten the mood, asking Jim about her hobbies and her hometown's climate, which she described as cold. Shane, jokingly chiding Jim's conversational skills, revealed his troubled childhood, having been in 5 foster homes and 4 institutions, calling his younger self a hot-headed mess. Jim later confided to the camera that Shane talked a lot. Upon reaching the river, their first task was to build an elevated shelter, followed by starting a fire. Fortunately, both had the foresight to bring fire-starting tools, a crucial item in the rainforest. Their first day was relatively pleasant. Jim, who's slow to warm up, gradually became more comfortable with Shane, even considering a hug. However, the good start was short-lived as a torrential rain began, typical for Costa Rican rainforests, sometimes lasting for weeks. This rain lasted until the 4th day, during which they did little but stay in the shelter to keep warm by the fire. On the 5th day, the sun finally emerged, signaling time for hunting. However, a disagreement arose. Jim wanted to find food immediately, while Shane planned to improve the shelter. While division of labor is wise, it should ideally be done after securing food. It was not ideal sending Jim, a young girl with little survival experience, to hunt alone. Jim walked around the area several times without catching any food. She sat by the river, crafted a fishing trap, and made a small fish hook, but unfortunately, she caught no fish. When Jim returned to the shelter, she found Shane shaking on the ground, likely still affected by the previous day's downpour. By day 9, Shane had slowly recovered, and it was time to hunt. He found a meter-long poisonous snake in the bushes, pinned it down with 2 logs, and then killed it with a machete. The whole event was so thrilling that even the monkeys in the trees were stunned. The snake was a great catch. However, when Shane showed the snake to Jim, she casually remarked that it was just a small snake. This comment really annoyed Shane, who retorted that if she couldn't say anything nice, she shouldn't speak at all. Shane felt hurt, having tried his best to make Jim happy, but she seemed indifferent about how the snake was caught. Communication was indeed a challenge, as both were not great conversationalists. Later, Shane slipped and almost fell down a slope while tracking a wild boar. If not for grabbing a branch, he might have been seriously injured. When he told Jim about the incident, she seemed more interested in whether he saw the boar and questioned the truth of his slip down the steep slope. Such incidents inevitably led to resentment and tension between them. On the 14th night, while Shane was sleeping, the shelter caught fire. Jim was supposed to watch the fire, but left for a moment, nearly resulting in Shane's death. The fire was a significant setback, almost leading them to abandon the challenge by day 16. Shane was visibly upset and sat in front of the shelter in a negative mood. Fortunately, Jim did not give up. At the river, Jim, driven by hunger, caught a turtle and had a satisfying meal. At this point, I wondered why this episode was called Jungle Curse. Was it the turtle that cursed them? Indeed, Jim suffered from food poisoning for several days after eating the turtle, becoming feverish and nearly incapacitated. During those days, Shane shouldered all the responsibilities. By day 20, when Jim recovered, Shane was exhausted. The pair struggled to share tasks in the final challenge of reaching a waterfall downstream. Although the path was not long, Shane moved slowly and with great difficulty. Despite his weakness, this made the victory all the more meaningful. To commemorate surviving 21 days in the Costa Rican rainforest, Jim smeared charcoal on herself as a symbol of their ordeal. After their successful challenge, let's see how much weight they lost. In just 21 days, Shane lost 20 kilograms, and Jim lost 12 kilograms. Shane's survival rating increased from 7.6 to 8.4, while Jim's rose from 5.8 to 7.8. Both possess decent skills. Their only shortcoming was cooperation, which made these 21 days quite painful. This episode's challenge took place on Kalimantan Island. In one incident, a contestant fell severely ill and lost consciousness just from drinking clear lake water and had to be hospitalized. Let's start today's challenge. First up is this episode's female contestant, Julie, who is 30 years old, 193 cm tall, a teacher, and an outdoor survival instructor. She is academically trained but lacks practical survival experience. The male contestant named Puma is 38 years old, an outdoor enthusiast, tattoo artist, and snowboarder. 20 years ago, Puma survived an accident while snowboarding in the wilderness thanks to his solid survival skills. Their introductions suggest both are quite capable. Upon arriving at the challenge location, the two contestants, stripped down, had a brief chat. Let's see what survival tools they brought. Puma chose a machete, while Julie opted for a cooking pot, but did not select any fire-making tools. Besides the cameras they carried, a professional film crew was there to document everything, reportedly returning to a hotel at night. It's unclear what the contestants did during these times. Next, let's examine the map. It marks their rescue location, situated 6 kilometers southwest down the river, where they need to reach after surviving for 21 days. The map also shows a clearing near the river to reach before nightfall, and the journey there is not easy, requiring continuous climbing and descending. Now, let's look at their initial survival skill ratings. These ratings are determined by experts based on skill, experience, and psychological factors. Puma has experience surviving in extreme environments, but tends to take risks, sometimes ignoring basic survival rules. Julie, while a survival skills instructor, severely lacks practical experience. Therefore, Puma's rating is 7.1 and Julie's is 5.5. Both scores are not high. Now, it's time for them to prove their abilities through action. After trekking through rugged terrain, the two finally reach the river. In wilderness survival, it's crucial to plan the order of survival essentials. Now that they have water, should they start a fire first or build a shelter? They didn't bring a fire starter, but considering the mosquitoes and leeches in the jungle, they decided to build a shelter first, raised off the ground. However, just being off the ground wasn't enough. They were still bothered by mosquitoes at night. During their first night, as they slept close together, a wild boar appeared nearby. Wild boars, being nocturnal, can become aggressive when threatened. With tusks up to 10 centimeters long, they can easily pierce the human body. Since it was only their first day and they were not yet adapted, lacking hunting tools, and with poor visibility at night, catching anything by hand was impossible. On the second day, they divided their tasks. Puma was responsible for making fire while Julie improved the shelter. Puma, with extensive experience in extreme environments, is well-versed in basic survival skills. He quickly started teaching how to make fire to the camera. However, despite the lessons, his attempts to start a fire failed because the area was too damp and the twigs too soft. Each contestant could carry one piece of survival equipment. A machete was essential, but choosing the second item was challenging. Bringing a flint meant no container to boil water, and a cooking pot was useless without fire. After Puma tired from making fire, Julie tried but also failed. The episode started with Julie teaching fire making at a survival school, but it proved much harder in the actual wilderness. Even an instructor like Julie struggled without real wilderness experience. Without fire, they couldn't boil water. They dared not drink the river water for fear of infections. At that point, Puma found a very clear water source. Feeling severely dehydrated, he drank without consulting Julie, taking a significant risk. It tasted great. Puma was quite interesting. He probably worried that Julie would advise against drinking, so he drank secretly. Back at camp, Julie was still trying to make fire. By the third day, Julie was weak from dehydration. Puma had relieved some of his thirst by secretly drinking and couldn't stand to see his partner suffering. He then found a cleaner water source. Rainwater filtered through soil. It wasn't very clean, but was better than the river water and what Puma had previously drunk. By the fourth day, they finally managed to make a fire. The fire not only boosted their morale, but also brought them good luck. In the following days, they got along very well, and everything went smoothly, continually catching food in their fish traps. On day 6, Julie caught a small turtle. They were living quite comfortably, a rare start indeed. They weren't full, but at least they had some food. However, this good life didn't last long. First, the hopeful fire they had went out. It was a critical mistake, something that shouldn't have happened. Both were busy gathering food, and now they had to start a fire again. But the weather was against them. Shortly after the fire went out, the sky filled with dark clouds and thunder roared, making it impossible to start a fire. They could only wait for the rain to stop. Near their shelter, the ground was covered with dry, brittle branches. Just recently, a huge tree trunk fell 3 meters from them. In such conditions, Puma and Julie were at risk of hypothermia. By day 8, the rain stopped, but Puma developed severe weakness and a headache, his hands trembling. He developed a high fever at night, and his condition worsened. It was no longer a matter of endurance. Julie quickly contacted rescue. Local medical personnel arrived on day 9 after the river levels went down. Puma's temperature had risen to 40 degrees Celsius. He had contracted a local bacterial infection, possibly cholera, typhoid, dengue fever, or malaria. Without timely treatment, these diseases could be fatal. Puma and Julie ate mostly the same food, except for the water Puma secretly drank. Puma's temperature kept rising, so the medical team cooled him in the water before taking him to the hospital. After Puma left, Julie was alone. If she could survive until day 21, it would be considered a successful challenge. However, it seemed unlikely she could continue. The first night without Puma, Julie managed to start a fire again. Having fire should have been hopeful, but there were still 11 days to go. With Puma gone, Julie had to do all the work alone. The only food source, the fish trap, was no longer lucky. She couldn't even catch a small crab. Alone and exposed in the wilderness, Julie couldn't sustain herself mentally or physically. Therefore, she gave up on day 18. It was a pity. They had started with difficulties in making fire but had great luck afterwards. Puma, who seemed experienced, sometimes took too many risks. Puma lost 7 kilograms in 10 days. Julie lost 14 kilograms in 18 days. Puma was discharged from the hospital 7 days after the challenge ended. Julie continues to teach survival skills in her hometown. Due to the failed challenge, Puma's rating dropped from 7.1 to 6.1. Julie's rating decreased from 5.5 to 5.0. Today's Primitive Life 21 Days is set on a scenic, uninhabited island in Fiji. The beautiful scenery is deceptive. Beneath the clear waters lurk aggressive white-tip and black-tip sharks. In the shallow bays along the shore, venomous sea snakes also lie in wait. On the yellow boat, we see today's female contestant, Field, aged 34. She works in luxury retail and is a professional makeup artist. Field always looks exquisite and elegant because of her job, giving her a delicate appearance. However, appearances can be deceiving. Field is a self-reliant, tough girl. She has enjoyed hunting and fishing since childhood, and is skilled in making fire and using weapons. Field is confident about this 21-day survival challenge. The male contestant this season is less confident. On the way to the uninhabited island, he was already nervous, anxious, and even a bit fearful. The man, Keith, aged 45, works in addiction and alcohol recovery. He is extroverted and likes seeking thrills. Keith served in the Army Reserve for 10 years and loves various outdoor sports. Keith says, "I believe I can survive under any conditions." But he added, "It's too hot here on an island, and I lack experience. I might fail." Field was a bit worried before meeting Keith, concerned he might see her as just a pretty face with poor survival skills. In fact, Keith was indeed attracted by Field's beauty. His only concern was that Field's fair skin might easily get sunburnt. Each contestant is allowed to bring one piece of equipment. Keith brought a machete, and Field brought fire-making tools. Next, let's look at the nearby map. Keith and Field were dropped in a desolate area. They need to walk through grassland covered with rough, serrated grass to reach the beach on the other side of the island. There, they will find food and freshwater resources. After the 21-day survival challenge, they need to leave the camp, cross the island's eastern side, pass areas inhabited by moray eels and sea snakes, and finally climb steep volcanic cliffs to await rescue. Now let's look at Keith and Field's survival ratings. These survival skill ratings are based on the challenger's skills, psychology, and experience. Keith has extensive experience in survival and outdoor adventures, earning him high scores in experience. However, his thrill-seeking personality leads to instability and lack of focus. Field scores well in problem-solving and perseverance, but prefers not to rely on others, which could affect her relationship with her partner. Therefore, Keith scores 6.3 and Field 6.1, barely passing with low scores. Upon reaching the beach on the other side of the island, they quickly found a water source. Due to the intense heat, they needed to drink quickly. Keith started a fire and cut some bamboo to boil water in. The first day progressed smoothly, a good start, but survival is never that easy. Despite having fire, fresh water, and bamboo containers, they couldn't boil the water and dared not drink it. This situation was new to them. When faced with the inability to boil water, they decided to keep trying instead of getting discouraged. Unable to drink, they also had to build a shelter to rest and search for clean water the next day. Without the ability to boil water, they ventured deeper inland to find a drinkable water source. Keith planned to cut down a banana tree, leaving 15 to 20 centimeters above the ground, and hollow out the middle to collect water. They used a rolled leaf as a makeshift straw. Keith almost choked on his first sip. The water tasted like battery electrolyte, making them thirstier. Failing that, they looked up and saw a coconut tree. Coconuts are a resource on the island, but reaching them was challenging. Keith decided to chop down the coconut tree, which was very labor-intensive. After much effort, he succeeded, but all the coconuts were green and contained no liquid, leaving Field puzzled and frustrated by the wasted effort. A sense of defeat loomed over them both. By the third day, both were severely dehydrated. They found a small stream on the beach and, thinking it was rainwater, they drank from it without hesitation. This confused me. Previously, they didn't dare drink the water they tried to boil with bamboo because it hadn't boiled. Yet now they were drinking from the stream. On the fourth night, heavy rain fell from the sky. They were desperate for water but hadn't prepared to collect rainwater in advance. Field tried to collect the remaining rainwater from crevices in rocks, but it wasn't much. Also, Field was working alone. Keith had diarrhea from drinking the stream water the day before and was in severe stomach pain, spending the day lying in the shelter. Because of this, Keith considered quitting. He admitted he couldn't adapt to every environment, which was much harder than he thought. By the sixth day, thoughts of leaving surfaced. Field didn't want Keith to leave and comforted him, suggesting they could take it slow, like fixing their shelter first. Encouraged by his partner, Keith said to the camera that he would use the resolve he teaches others in overcoming addiction to face each day, breaking it down to an hour or even a minute if necessary. His words were motivational. However, when their fish trap came up empty and the stream water ran out, their morale dropped again. Due to dehydration, their vision blurred and tempers flared. At this point, Keith recklessly attempted to catch a sea snake with a machete, despite lacking the ability. He liked the thrill, or perhaps used it to mask his incompetence. Dehydrated and without food, they started blaming each other. On the 11th day, Keith suffered spasms and became delirious. Field quickly called for medical help, and Keith was taken to the hospital. Diagnosed with severe dehydration and acute exhaustion, doctors suggested he remain hospitalized. With Keith gone, Field was left alone for the last 10 days. Despite the difficulties, Field, a very strong girl as she described herself, made a fishing spear and ventured into the shallow, dangerous waters to try catching small blackfin sharks. Although the sharks were small, their thick skin made it impossible for her to pierce them with her strength. With limited food in the area, Field survived on bananas and small crabs, and even ate termites in the final days. With remarkable perseverance, Field endured for 21 days and successfully climbed a volcanic cliff to complete the final challenge. Field became the first contestant to persevere alone after her partner left. Keith withdrew midway, losing 16 kilograms in 11 days, while Field lost 15 kilograms in 21 days. Field's score increased from 6.1 to 7.0, whereas Keith's dropped from 6.3 to 4.5, a rather embarrassing score. It's uncertain if Keith will still claim he can survive in any environment. Today's challenge is set in the heartland of South America, Bolivia, between the towering Andes Mountains and the perilous Amazon rainforest. The female contestant making her appearance is Sabrina, a 30-year-old who has never left the United States. Surprisingly, her first trip abroad is to such an extreme environment. Sabrina is married with 3 children. Many married individuals, including newlyweds, participate in this show. Would you let your significant other join, or would you convince them to let you? Sabrina considers herself a modern American witch. We'll soon find out why. The male contestant is Vincent, a 49-year-old full-time survival instructor. Vincent claims he might be one of the best survivors in the world. Confidence is good, but claiming to be one of the best might be overreaching. After their introduction, We'll see what tools each brought. Vincent has a wooden container, useful for carrying water and making fire by friction. Sabrina brought a small hatchet. Now, let's follow the cameraman and see the contestants' skills. Sabrina and Vincent are placed at a river bend, cutting through dense jungle. They need to travel 13 kilometers downstream to a box canyon area rich in survival resources. Surviving in the rainforest is much harder than on islands. The last time this show visited the Amazon, 3 contestants were frightened off. Dropping rookies into tough scenarios creates good viewing but complicates things. If contestants leave within a week, what's the point? Hence, the scores are not low this time. Vincent scores 8.2, Sabrina 6.7. On the way to the valley, Vincent acted like a teacher, explaining survival skills to Sabrina. He taught her how to apply mud on her skin as sunscreen and how to carefully walk in shallow water. Sabrina felt annoyed, questioning the necessity of mud for sun protection in the rainforest. By the end of the first day, they hadn't reached the valley and quickly built a shelter to spend the night. They planned to follow the river at dawn. Though the river was right before them, they couldn't drink directly from it due to contamination and the hot climate. Sabrina experienced severe stomach pain, and Vincent used eucalyptus leaves to alleviate it. The oil from the leaves eased her cramps, and after resting, Sabrina recovered. They successfully reached the valley and joyfully bathed under a small waterfall. On the other side of the valley, water continuously flowed through porous sandstone, clean but still potentially hazardous. After thoughtful consideration, they decided to risk building a shelter there. Why was building a shelter considered a risk? The valley was box-shaped with cliffs on 3 sides, making it dangerous during the rainy season. They completed their shelter before nightfall and managed to start a fire, just as the sky grew overcast and winds picked up. A heavy rain could destroy their shelter, prompting Sabrina to suggest building a surrounding wall. While working together, conflict arose again. Sabrina criticized Vincent for constantly lecturing her like a teacher or boss and told him to shut up. Vincent, feeling extremely criticized, went hunting alone during the day without informing Sabrina, citing her constant complaints about the heat and cold as annoying. Vincent caught a small bird after hunting all day, which also upset Sabrina. By the 8th day, their only food sources were this small bird and some berries, with Vincent always hunting while Sabrina stayed at the shelter. She created a mysterious circle, not for food, but in response to the bird they ate together. Sabrina felt infinite sadness and a bad omen when she saw the bird killed, believing it was a sign of bad luck, and created the circle to ward off misfortune. Vincent was puzzled by her actions. After returning from hunting, he found the shelter decorated with witchcraft items. In the following days, Vincent made a spear and fished in the river, a routine task. Sabrina remarked that if it were her husband, he would have hunted in the jungle instead of wasting time in the river. This clearly showed the deep-seated conflict between them, as they could hardly stand each other. On the 11th day, a torrential rain began. They could do nothing but take shelter and keep warm by the fire. The waterfall behind them swelled after 3 days of rain, but it didn't threaten their shelter. They could only hope that it wouldn't rain in the days to come. After the storm, Vincent's condition worsened significantly. He could no longer hunt outside as before and was weak, lying in the shelter. Despite previous conflicts, it was time to support each other and complete the challenge. However, they lacked communication. Even as Vincent collapsed, Sabrina did nothing. Vincent, suffering from dehydration, malnutrition, and fatigue, could no longer stay conscious. After a medical check, Vincent insisted he could continue. By the 16th day, with no food, the situation was dire. Sabrina did not step up to find food and mentally collapsed after Vincent fell ill. Vincent did not want to severely harm his health for the challenge and admitted defeat on the 16th day, leaving Sabrina to survive alone. Sabrina, lacking the capability to face the wilderness alone, also struggled. Every time before fishing, Sabrina prayed but found no substantial food. By the 20th day, Sabrina suffered severe abdominal pain, possibly from a serious infection or appendicitis. Medics had to evacuate her immediately. Over 16 days, Vincent lost 9 kilograms and Sabrina lost 4.5 kilograms in 20 days. Despite performing much better than previous contestants, they still failed. Given their survival and cooperation skills, I think their scores should be significantly reduced, especially Sabrina's. However, experts believed Sabrina bravely persevered for 20 days. so her score increased from 6.7 to 7.5. Vincent's score decreased from 8.2 to 7.1. This beautiful lady is this season's female contestant, Kelly, who is 25 years old. The male contestant is 40-year-old Tom, a family-oriented retired veteran. He joined the competition to set an example for his children. Kelly is also a veteran, formerly a Marine, and currently works as a part-time model. Kelly and Tom will be dropped on the west bank of the Matuk River, located in the densest jungle in southern Cambodia. The area is hot and humid, home to various spiders, venomous snakes, and fierce crocodiles in the river. Upon arriving at the competition site, the contestants strip down to face each other naked. Despite their gentle appearances, it's surprising that they don't argue. Kelly appears quite shy. Each contestant is allowed to bring one survival item. Tom brought flint and Kelly brought a machete. Let's take a look at the map. The first thing for Kelly and Tom is to find water and a place to stay overnight. Their best option is to head inland, through the snake-infested jungle, to a tributary in this area. Before the challenge, experts evaluated the contestants based on skills, experience, and psychological aspects, assigning them a preliminary survival rating, PSR. Both contestants scored points for their military backgrounds. Tom, a former officer with leadership experience, scored 6.6. Kelly, strong-willed with a comprehensive set of survival skills, scored 6.4. The scores are not high due to their lack of wilderness survival experience. Experts mentioned that Tom's leadership might not be advantageous, as all the female contestants are strong-willed and opinionated. If Tom insists on being a leader, it might not be beneficial. At the start of the challenge, they both had a reasonably good impression of each other. The Cambodian jungle is home to over 30 types of snakes, including the formidable king cobra, which can grow up to 5.5 meters long and move its head at speeds up to 80 kilometers per hour. At 2 p.m., the pair found a flowing stream and a clear rocky area, ideal for building a shelter. Nearby bamboo and vines make excellent materials for construction. However, nights in Cambodia can be very cold without clothing, and the best course of action is to start a fire quickly. Tom successfully started a fire, but it was still very cold sleeping in the unfinished shelter. Kelly wanted to cuddle with Tom for warmth, but he kept his distance, refusing to embrace anyone other than his wife, a decision that speaks to his character but left Kelly very cold. She just wanted to warm up, as the nights here are unbearably cold. Tom's refusal to share body heat seemed absurd. This show has made it clear. Those who start off struggling might end up doing well, while those who seem to have a smooth start face continuous trouble from day one. Some contestants struggled terribly without fire, while others, even with fire, suffer immensely. The next day, Kelly was still fearful of the night's cold. Tom made it clear to her that he feared his wife getting angry, so they could not get close. This added an invisible distance between two strangers. Who do you think is to blame here? Nearby bamboo makes a great container for boiling water. Once the water boils, it's safe to drink. Both contestants are energetic and should be out hunting and gathering food. But since making fire, their progress has slowed. They just improve their shelter and drink hot water every day. Kelly is restless. She doesn't want to spend 21 days near the shelter starving. She wants to explore and forage, not return home and tell friends she just sat on a rock for 21 days. Kelly is full of ideas, but Tom seems indifferent. He prefers to stay in familiar areas, but brother, no food means even familiar places are no good. This caused a disagreement. Kelly didn't care and went out alone. Before she left, Tom asked her to bring back some firewood. After exploring alone for a while, Kelly reached a small river cove. Though the scenery was nice and open, it was very dangerous with crocodiles nearby. Kelly caught many clams there and returned happily to share with Tom, who did not care and remained upset. When he saw the clams, he wasn't happy and asked about the firewood Kelly had forgotten, focused only on finding food. If I were Kelly, I'd be angry too. I bring back food and you're ungrateful, blaming me for not bringing firewood. What were you doing at home? During the clam roasting, Tom kept instructing Kelly on what to do. Kelly couldn't take it anymore and sat down to talk with Tom. Communication didn't solve the problem, it only worsened it. I wanted to see you display some survival skills, Tom said. I haven't seen any. And you tell me you could build the shelter yourself. I could tear it down, and you can try making it again to see how it turns out. Besides chopping bamboo and collecting wood, what else can you do? Let me analyze this. Tom wants to survive in his own way, which is to barely survive for 21 days. This method has its merits but is too risky without food and loses the meaning of the challenge. When Kelly confronts Tom, he responds by saying, "I made the fire. I built the shelter. Isn't that enough?" Neither wants to compromise. On day 8, they cooperated to collect clams together. However, they ended up arguing over a trivial matter on the way back. Eventually, they each did their own work, with one working while the other lay around, never offering any help. This mutual anger only left them hungrier. By day 18, Tom finally compromised a bit. He volunteered to go out and find clams to eat. This time, however, Kelly chose to stay and gather firewood. Tom brought back 7 clams, 2 of which were dead. After starving for many days, a few small clams were hardly enough to eat. By now, the challenge was nearly complete, but they were close to failing. On the final day, day 21, they should have left early for the rescue location. Instead, they waited for the water in the bamboo to boil. While waiting, Kelly nearly burned her hands boiling water, and Tom just watched without helping. Frustrated, Kelly walked away. Tom had to search for her for quite a while, which was risky. The helicopter had to return to base before dark, and it was already afternoon when they finally set off. They took a wrong turn because they didn't check the map, but fortunately the helicopter kept searching and eventually rescued them. Although Kelly and Tom completed the challenge, their poor performance significantly lowered their primitive skills scores. Kelly's score dropped from 6.4 to 4.8, and Tom's from 6.6 to 5.4. It was the first time I saw scores drop so much in a successful challenge. Why bother arguing so much? It's a bad example for children watching the show. After the show, Kelly returned to her modeling career at home, and Tom went home to recuperate. Today, our focus shifts to a deserted island in Dominica, where the new female contestant, Colin, 32, from California, an extreme sports athlete and nutritionist, appears. Colin has always loved outdoor survival and is a skilled obstacle racer, very confident in her mental toughness. The male contestant, Chris, 38, a commercial fisherman and former Marine, has learned survival skills from a young age, especially during his 4 years in the Marines. His most confident survival skill is making fire using primitive methods, claiming he can successfully start a fire within 1 to 2 hours. Upon arrival at the challenge site, the next step is to undress. Chris, confident in his physique and indifferent to being naked, also hoped for an attractive female partner. I wouldn't say Chris is lecherous. At least he's honest about his thoughts. This is the American dream, you know? The only thing better would be 2 naked women. Okay, buddy. Let's end that fantasy there. Let's first see what survival tools each of you has brought. Each contestant is allowed to carry 1 item. Colin brought a cooking pot, and Chris brought a knife. Now let's look at the map. We are on an uninhabited island in Dominica, known for its sharp volcanic rock terrain. The narrow coastline is lined with steep cliffs, and the island is scarce in resources. The contestants can only risk entering the shallow sea areas to hunt, exposing them to various dangerous creatures: venomous sea urchins, highly aggressive bull sharks, and Portuguese man-o'-wars. A sting from a jellyfish can cause fever and shock. These are the dangers the contestants will face. In the initial phase of the challenge, the focus is of course on finding water and building shelters. They quickly found a water source by digging beside a riverbed to access relatively clean groundwater. While searching for a shelter, they hesitated continuously, debating between living in a cave or building a small tent. As the day was almost ending, they finally decided to build a shelter on an open piece of land by themselves. Before participating in the challenge, survival experts evaluated the contestants based on skill, experience, and psychological aspects, assigning them a primitive survival rating, PSR. Chris, with his extensive wilderness survival experience, received a PSR of 7.1, though his personality might clash with his partner. Colin, a competitive athlete but lacking wilderness survival experience, scored 6.1. The wind is strong here, so extra effort is needed in building the shelter. Once the shelter is built, they can rest. However, during the process, the two had their first disagreement. What happened? Colin had her own ideas for the shelter, which she shared with Chris. Chris didn't adopt any of her suggestions, thinking they were useless and would make the shelter very fragile. Chris likes to lead and is very direct. He believes in doing things his way without compromise. which would be perfect with a submissive partner. But that wouldn't be interesting. Despite her petite appearance, Colin is very strong-willed and independent. After Chris repeatedly refused to implement her suggestions, Colin, frustrated, went to the sea to bathe. They are both over 30, such a minor issue shouldn't be a big deal. Regardless, the shelter was eventually built. Colin woke up shivering from the cold late the next night. "It's really cold," she muttered. The wind was strong outside and it was impossible to stay warm without fire. Starting a fire is Chris's forte. He claimed he could get a fire going in 1 to 2 hours. If that's true, there wouldn't be any rush to start one today. Quietly, Colin asked, "What if the fire doesn't start, big brother?" Chris replied confidently, "It won't fail, trust me. Let's not rush the fire. We'll go get some food from the sea first." They then built a fishing trap together. After setting it up, Chris went deeper into the sea to place the trap. As a fisherman, it was uncertain how many fish Chris could catch over the 21 days. Later, they ate a sea urchin raw by the shore. "I've never tried sea urchin, it probably isn't tasty," said Colin. "Eating raw isn't a solution. Now it's finally time to start the fire. Chris, please begin your performance." Smoke appeared, but Chris's technique seemed off. The rope for his bow drill snapped before a fire started. It was an unexpected setback, or else they would have had a roaring fire by now. Colin scoffed from the side. "So much for the expert. It only takes an hour at home, but it doesn't work here. Let's try my method." Colin suggested the fire saw method. "I think this method might be worse than the bow drill," Chris remarked. Despite their efforts, they failed to start a fire. Over the next few days, Colin tried multiple times without success. "Sister, some things need the right technique. Brute force won't work," Chris said. Failing to start a fire was a major setback for Colin. She broke down in tears on camera. "No food and the cold nights are too much for me," she cried. Colin had said she could handle and endure any situation, but in reality, she couldn't. The lack of fire gradually wore her down, and the empty fishing trap didn't help. Chris noticed Colin's negativity and wanted to communicate, but Colin refused to speak to him just because he hadn't started a fire. "Why can't you act like a man and get the fire going?" she lamented. A team should face difficulties together, not blame one person, Chris thought. Though he had boasted at the start, he was genuinely trying to start a fire and wasn't slacking or being negative. Colin, however, was too frustrated to communicate and even disappeared for a while. This was clearly not the way to handle the situation. On day 13, Colin could no longer endure hunger and the cold. She approached the show's producer, announced her withdrawal, and left the challenge. Now, only Chris remained. Chris was furious about his partner's sudden departure. He almost smashed the camera. Fortunately, a cameraman intervened. Channeling his anger into motivation, Chris crafted a new bow drill and quickly started a fire shortly after Colin left. On day 17, Chris caught a large crab. Cooking and eating it was incredibly satisfying. The crab provided Chris with the energy needed to complete the challenge. By day 21, he had to walk 3.2 kilometers along steep cliffside shores to reach the southern beach for rescue, marking his success. Due to difficulties with the rescue boat reaching the shore, Chris swam out to it, completing the challenge successfully. Colin lost 10 pounds over 13 days, and Chris lost 20 pounds in 21 days. Chris's rating increased from 7.1 to 7.9, while Colin's dropped from 6.1 to 4.9. Today's episode of Primitive Living 21 Days is set near the Himalayan region in Kumaon, northern India. The location is a hill covered with pine forests with cold air from the Himalayan glaciers, causing heavy rain below, leading to temperatures dropping below 10 degrees at night. Without clothes, the cold would be unbearable. The contestants face threats from Asian black bears, fierce leopards, and venomous saw-scaled vipers. This episode features male contestant Hajin, a 36-year-old martial arts expert and Iraq War veteran with extensive wilderness survival skills, proficient in fire-making, shelter building, and hunting. The female contestant is Freya, a 27-year-old survival expert who has lived a nomadic life with her father since childhood. Freya shared, "As a child, my father raised me in a communal open-air environment. Nature is my home, and being naked in nature is nothing new to me. My only concern is the cold." The contestants arrived at the challenge site, facing the cold wind. They undressed and met each other. Each contestant could bring one survival item. Freya brought a lighter, and Hajin brought an axe. Starting from an altitude of 1370 meters, Hajin and Fredeya needed to climb an additional 600 meters to reach a large canyon, set up camp, and find water sources. The higher they climbed, the thinner the air became, accelerating dehydration and making breathing more difficult. The first day involved mountain climbing, which proved to be extremely challenging. Fredeya had to stop halfway to rest. By 5 p.m., they had reached an altitude of 1950 meters, where they could proceed with their plans. They disagreed on whether to start a fire or build a shelter first. Fredeya, shivering from the cold, wanted to start a fire for warmth, but Hajin disagreed, believing that they could survive without fire for the night, but not without a shelter. Hajin felt that in wilderness survival, priority should be given to protecting oneself by building a shelter to stay safe from the dangers of the wild. After the shelter was constructed, Fredeya successfully started a fire with a flint. The first day ended smoothly as both critical tasks were completed. However, due to a lack of time during the day to gather sufficient wood, they barely slept at night, constantly worrying about the fire going out. The next day, Fredeya and Hajin followed a stream near their camp, hoping to find a drinkable water source. After a full day's search without success, Fredeya, weakened by dehydration, chose to drink directly from the stream flowing beneath the rocks. The stream water could contain bacteria or parasites, potentially causing dysentery and other fatal gastrointestinal diseases. It's difficult to find clean water in the wild, and boiling it before drinking is advisable. Despite not wanting to boil the water, Fredeya and Hajin traveled far, but Fredeya eventually gave in and drank the stream water. Soon after, she was doubled over with severe stomach pain, vomiting, and suffering from diarrhea. Fredeya chose not to quit, but persevered. During this time, Hajin didn't complain, but took care of Fredeya while maintaining their survival. Continuing this way, they likely wouldn't last the 21 days. Fredeya's quick recovery was crucial for the success of the 21-day challenge. Before the competition, experts rated the contestants based on skills, experience, and psychology. Hajin, with military experience, scored 6.8, while Fredeya scored 6.2. Hajin's score might seem low, but Fredeya's could drop significantly due to her unsafe drinking choice. Now, it was about completing the challenge. After 3 days of vomiting and diarrhea, Fredeya suffered greatly both physically and mentally. As a tough woman who wanted to excel in the wilderness, she really didn't want to give up. Fortunately, her teammate Hajin, with his military background, wouldn't easily abandon a comrade. Using sand and stones from the riverbed, Hajin filtered the stream water for Fredeya to drink. Due to severe dehydration from vomiting and diarrhea, Fredeya urgently needed to replenish her fluids. There might not be suitable containers nearby to store water, raising the question of why they didn't just boil some water to drink. Regardless, Hajin proved to be a supportive partner. After a while, Fredeya felt somewhat better. At that time, Hajin was rebuilding the shelter. Fredeya, puzzled and somewhat annoyed, asked Hajin, "Why are you building the shelter again? Have you gathered enough wood for the fire tonight? It gets very cold, and the fire always goes out by midnight. I keep waking up freezing." Hajin believed it was okay if the fire went out. "Worrying about the fire all night is the real mistake," he said. Hajin was the only one working and couldn't do everything. "Fredeya, please don't complain. The rebuilt shelter looks very warm." On the 4th day of the challenge, Fredeya was still curled up in pain. Hajin called the doctor, and the production team began assessing her condition. Fredeya had contracted dysentery but didn't need hospital treatment. She could continue if she wished, supported by her teammate. Despite this, Hajin suggested, "I think you should withdraw. Your condition is severe, and since you've been down, you can't do anything. It's hard enough for me to survive, let alone take care of another." Fredeya, a strong girl, didn't want to give up or admit defeat. Her perseverance was admirable. By the 8th day, she had recovered somewhat and even helped Hajin build a fireplace for warmth. After completing the fireplace, Fredeya caught a small crab in the creek, barely 40 grams of meat, providing only about 20 calories and 4 grams of protein each if shared. But it was better than nothing. By the 12th day, they had built a very sturdy shelter, enough to withstand the harsh nights of North India. However, their food supply was still meager, which wasn't surprising given the sparse resources near the mountains. There probably weren't any fish in the creek. Fredeya started eating earthworms raw, which were uncomfortable to swallow and got stuck in her throat. On the 15th day, Freya found a dead bird in the creek, a red-billed blue magpie. Although there wasn't much meat, it was enough for them. The cause of the bird's death was unknown, and it might have carried diseases like avian flu or encephalitis. But for two extremely hungry people, not eating it was not an option. They took the bird back, cooked it, and shared the meat. Eating meat was certainly better than eating earthworms. I'm getting hungry now. I'll buy a chicken leg for dinner. In the previous episodes, every team essentially survived on an empty stomach, and this season's contestants were no exception. After they finished the bird, it seemed unlikely there would be another meal during the challenge. However, Hajin's shelter was exceptionally well built. It wasn't just a simple hut. It was a structured wooden cabin with a small fireplace. Staying inside by the fire during the rain really made them fearless. The final stage of the competition was evacuation. They needed to descend 600 meters and travel approximately 8 kilometers, then cross a dangerous stream to reach the road below. Just at this crucial moment, Freya's dysentery flared up again. Hajin almost thought he would have to carry Freya out, but her strength surprised him. Despite abdominal pain, she walked ahead of Hajin and ultimately completed the challenge. Freya truly pushed her physical limits. Interestingly, the van that picked them up was loaded with many chickens, making them crave chicken legs for their return meal. After a tough 21-day challenge, Freya lost 20 kilograms, and Hajin, who never complained, lost 36 kilograms. He was indeed a great teammate. Now let's look at the survival scores. Hajin went from 6.8 to 7.4, and Freya from 6.2 to 6.9. It's curious how the experts rated them. Perhaps they thought Hajin's lower score was due to less hunting. A score of 7.4 does seem a bit low. Today's episode of Primitive Survival for 21 Days takes place in the swamps of Louisiana, home to over 1 million American alligators and 6 types of venomous snakes, including the deadly cottonmouth that feeds on fish in the water. If surviving in the rainforest is tough, this swamp is a real killer. Let's see how today's contestants perform. The male contestant, Billy, 39, is an outdoor travel writer and primitive survival skills expert, skilled in using primitive weapons to hunt. Swamps are Billy's least familiar environment, and he is not very confident about this challenge. The female contestant, Kate, is a stunt actress. Her job has taught her how to overcome various challenging situations. Before even reaching the challenge site, the contestants saw alligators swimming nearby. Stepping into murky water without clothes must be terrifying. After undressing, the contestants faced each other naked in the river water. It's awkward now, but best to keep it brief as staying here is too dangerous. Each contestant is allowed to bring one survival item. Kate brought flint, and Billy brought a knife. Let's take a look at the map of this area. Kelly and Billy have been left in a vast swamp with no clear landmarks around, so they need to set out quickly. They aim to find a higher ground in the densely vegetated swamp where they can camp and survive for 21 days. Their final task is to reach a deep water area teeming with ferocious crocodiles to await rescue. Before the challenge began, experts evaluated the contestants on skill, experience, and mental strength, giving them an initial survival rating known as PSR. Billy scored high on skills, but his mental resilience was considered weak. Kate is calm and methodical, but lacks survival skills. Billy scored 8.1 and Kate 6.3. The journey to their survival high ground was challenging. Without any warm-up, they plunged into the icy swamp waters. Despite Billy's strong appearance, he continuously complained about the cold and expressed fear of unknown dangers underwater, such as crocodiles and deadly snakes. A small alligator just over 1 meter long could potentially rip off a limb. Amidst this, Billy heard a crocodile nearby, chilling him to the bone. Using the sun for direction, Billy confirmed they were not going in circles. Soon, they found a barren island, the only high ground within several kilometers, offering very limited space for shelter. The swamp water was murky and smelly. With the temperature around 10 degrees and bad weather expected, Billy and Kate needed to build a sturdy and warm shelter quickly. Kate found a crucial survival item, a cooking pot, without which boiling water would have been a problem. While the island was elevated, water was everywhere, and snakes occasionally swam by. Luckily, Billy was skilled at catching snakes, turning them into food. He quickly subdued one, securing their dinner for the night. Billy also managed to start a fire with flint. showcasing his excellent hunting and fire-making skills, justifying his high score of 8.1. They enjoyed snake meat and broth that night, a comforting end to the day. However, the drop in temperature at night and the annoyance of mosquitoes made it tough for them. The next day, they decided to rebuild their shelter as the previous one was too flimsy and drafty. Billy gathered ironweed for bedding, while Kate, during her material collection, encountered a venomous cottonmouth snake at her feet. Billy, taking no chances, crafted a primitive spear and used it to kill the snake by piercing its head. Shortly after Billy killed the venomous snake, several cottonmouths appeared around them. Billy was scared and hesitated to act. It was time to gather wood to build a shelter, but the roaming snakes limited their movement. And there were also crocodiles to consider. Billy took a deep breath, grabbed his spear, and chased after the nearest snake. Instead of worrying about snake bites at night, he decided to take the initiative. With his excellent hunting skills, Billy caught 2 snakes today. A great start. However, the success didn't last long. On the 4th night, a heavy rainstorm hit, flooding the area around their shelter. Initially, the island was only 30 centimeters higher than the surrounding water, but now it was submerged. Starting a fire off the ground became their biggest challenge. Billy and Kate needed to build a platform high up to start a fire, and construct a sloping roof over it for protection. This made starting a fire much safer. By the 7th day, Billy's feet hurt badly from being soaked in the swamp's stagnant water for too long. Soaking can lead to trench foot, where skin gradually rots and peels off. Stepping on a thorn could quickly lead to severe infection. Since the water level rose, the snakes disappeared. Now the best food source was crayfish. They quickly made traps for catching crayfish and used their feet in the water to attract leeches as bait for the traps. But they caught no crayfish and lost much blood to leeches. On the 13th day, Billy couldn't stand it anymore and wanted to move. Based on his observations of the river's flow, he believed there was another high ground nearby. Initially, Kate didn't want to move because she doubted the existence of another high ground and was concerned about having to build a new shelter. Billy was decisive, saying they should either quit now or move. Though risky, Billy's decision was right. The journey to relocate was fraught with dangers as they walked through deep water in a vast swamp. Billy doubted his decision at one point, but fortunately, luck was on their side. They found a dry, elevated land, bringing immense relief from the swamp. From day 15 to 17, they built a shelter. During this time, they caught a beaver. The beaver was sizable. After eating the meat, they could use its skin for clothing. Everything started going smoothly again. The final stage of the challenge was to reach the rescue point. The water near the rescue area was very deep. They hoped not to encounter crocodiles or venomous snakes along the way. Billy built 2 shelters over 21 days and had no strength left to catch snakes. Alligators, which can swim up to 32 kilometers per hour, hunt in deeper waters of the swamp. They float on the surface and silently dive to attack prey. Therefore, both contestants had to be very careful. Ultimately, under the watchful eyes of crocodiles, Billy and Kate completed the 21-day challenge. During this time, Kate lost 8 kilograms and Billy lost 19 kilograms, highlighting the hardships Billy endured. Although Kate did little, she stayed by Billy's side, encouraging and comforting him. Eventually, Billy's survival rating increased from 8.1 to 8.9, and Kate's from 6.3 to 7.7. Today's episode of Naked and Afraid was set in Brazil's Lagoa-Maranhenses National Park, which spans over 36,000 square kilometers of sand dunes. The contestants faced a harsh survival environment. The male contestant, Matt, 24 years old, a survival skills instructor and blacksmith, who is also a vegetarian, had a rebellious youth, starting marijuana in 5th grade and cocaine in 7th. Fortunately, he later straightened out and joined the competition to test his abilities. Observing the desolate sand dunes, Matt felt uncertain. The female contestant, Nora, 28 years old, a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner and extreme sports enthusiast, described herself as a wild child. Despite having blonde hair, Nora said she never did manicures or shaved her legs, likening herself to a man. Upon arriving at the challenge site, it was time to strip. When Matt took off his shirt, the fat on his belly was noticeable. Fat is not a hindrance in wilderness survival. In my view, it is the best survival tool. Both contestants today were wild and carefree about being naked. Nora mentioned she used to enjoy running naked in the rain. On these barren dunes, unprotected skin could quickly burn. After a brief interaction upon meeting, we looked at the survival items they brought. Matt had a machete he made himself, while Nora brought just a magnifying glass. Matt was initially puzzled, but then realized the magnifying glass could be used to start a fire. We no longer needed a map. Looking around, it was all sand and rainwater puddles. Under limited resources and exposed to intense heat, the challenge for the contestants was not just 21 days, but 504 hours or even 30,240 minutes. On their first day, Matt and Nora spent the entire day looking for a place to stay on the sand dunes. To avoid the strong desert winds, they moved to a lower level of the desert. There, like children building sandcastles, they piled up sand to block the wind. They slept on the sand that night. Before sleeping, Nora excitedly said she felt like a baby. However, by midnight, she was uncomfortable and felt as if bugs were biting her. The pain made her reluctant to call herself a baby anymore. It was still the first day, and Nora couldn't help but cry. Before the challenge, experts evaluated their skills and psychological readiness. Matt, a wilderness survival instructor with extensive experience in harsh environments, was rated 7.1, which seemed low despite the praise. Nora, with her clever mind, scored 7.6. Matt and Nora reached a densely vegetated area where they gathered materials to build a shelter. While chopping, Nora saw a group of ants and ate some without hesitation, offering some to Matt. Matt, a vegetarian, declined, stating he wouldn't eat insects. If he caught any animals, he would give all to Nora. They collected dry leaves before building the shelter. Matt suggested they drink some water first. Nora had found a small container, and they collected a bowl of water at a water hole. Nora then took out her magnifying glass. I thought she was going to use it to start a fire to boil the water, but she simply used it to heat the water in the container, moving the glass constantly to sterilize each part of the water. It was a way to treat the water, but Nora almost got sunburned in the process. Matt felt this was a waste of time and went to build the shelter without drinking. As a survival expert, Matt should know the importance of making fire. Since the beginning, they hadn't discussed making fire, perhaps because it was truly impossible on these sand dunes. There was no solid wood, and Nora had brought a magnifying glass instead of a flint. Matt was ready to drink directly from the pit. Nora's method of boiling water could burn her as well. Due to limited materials, Matt had to make full use of the terrain to make the shelter more stable and reliable. After much persuasion, Matt turned around and saw Nora still exposed on the sand dunes, using the magnifying glass to boil water. This method might sound impressive, but it's actually foolish because it requires constant exposure to the sun. Nora, have you considered that boiling water like this won't compensate for the water you lose during the process? Meanwhile, Matt collected some fruits and edible plants. In the evening, Matt drank water directly from the pit. By the third day, Nora was extremely weak. Despite this, she told the camera, "Matt is too reckless. Hasn't he seen how previous participants had to quit because they drank untreated water? Drinking unboiled, stagnant water is very dangerous." However, Nora did not consider the current situation. Matt remained energetic and even caught a large desert locust for Nora. It would have been delicious if roasted, but since they had no fire, Nora continued to cook the locust with her magnifying glass and ate it all. Here, I think Matt was kind to Nora, but the harsh environment began to affect Nora's mentality. She started to constantly complain about Matt, criticizing him for just sitting in the shelter and not searching for food. Eventually, Nora even resorted to verbal attacks, saying, "Sorry, but you are really stupid. I'm not the fat one here. Well, you stink. That's another thing. We are physically repulsive to each other. I realized from the first day you smelled really bad, even before you got dirty. Sleeping next to you at night, I had to hold back from vomiting. It's disgusting. As survival partners, there's no need to be so humiliating. Being fat doesn't mean you don't need to eat." In Nora's eyes, Matt was lazy whenever he paused. After being humiliated, Matt got angry, and the two fell into a cold war. Eventually, Nora took half the shelter materials to start over alone, declaring, "You do your 21 days, I'll do mine," as if they were getting a divorce. However, Nora soon realized that it's better to be with someone in the desolate dunes, especially since she only had a magnifying glass, and Matt had the machete. During the Cold War, Nora had a tough time until day 15 when their relationship began to improve. Nora found a coconut but couldn't open it without a knife, so she had to ask Matt for help. After drinking the coconut water, she apologized to Matt, who quickly forgave her. However, just an hour after reconciling, Nora fainted from severe dehydration and lost consciousness. Matt immediately called for a doctor who took Nora to the hospital for emergency treatment. She recovered, but the doctor decided she could no longer continue in the challenge. Now on day 17, with only 4 days left, it wasn't much for Matt. Due to his excess body fat, he managed to reach the extraction point after a long journey and completed the 21-day challenge by helicopter. Nora lost 16 pounds in 16 days, and Matt lost 26 pounds in 21 days. Matt's score increased from 7.1 to 7.7, while Nora's score decreased from 7.6 to 7.2. I am puzzled by Nora's exit. She could have lasted until the end with Matt, but she chose to struggle alone, boiling water under the sun with a magnifying glass. 3 days after the challenge ended, Matt returned the magnifying glass to Nora. This magnifying glass was very important to Nora as it was left to her by her recently deceased father. Today, we shift our focus to the southern Great Swamp in Florida, USA, which covers about 5,200 square kilometers. In this mysterious, otherworldly environment, elusive Florida panthers and venomous snakes roam. But the true rulers of this swamp are the fierce alligators, some measuring up to 4.6 meters long. Thinking about this, I am already sweating for today's 2 participants. Without further ado, let's welcome our 2 brave contestants. First up is the dashing female warrior, Amber, 31 years old, an Army instructor and mother of 2. Amber says her marriage is very happy and fulfilling. So why endure the hardships of the swamp? It turns out her military career has made her a survival expert, often grappling with alligators during training. Her goal in taking on this challenge is clear: to showcase her skills in hunting alligators. I admire her courage, but let's remember, this is a wild swamp where the alligators are fierce predators, not the tame creatures from a breeding farm. Next, we have Ryan, a 29-year-old male challenger and top hunter. Ryan was once a Marine, deployed multiple times to the front lines in Afghanistan and Iraq. After retiring, he went through a period of confusion and struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder. Fortunately, Ryan found his purpose in wilderness adventures. He says this challenge is to test his survival skills, and if successful, he plans to open a wilderness survival school. I have high hopes for both contestants today. Now, both have arrived at the challenge site. Wait a minute, Amber, you didn't have to dress up for the show. Okay, after both contestants stripped down, they faced each other naked in the swamp waters. After a brief awkward chat, let's see what survival equipment each brought. Amber brought a machete, and Ryan brought a fire starter. The contestants are almost entirely in a wetland covered by water. Their only chance of survival is to cross the dangerous swamp to find higher ground for camping. After determining their rough location on the map, they need to hurry and set off. If they don't leave soon, I'll be worried for them as the alligators are on their way. Ryan is particularly afraid of nearly 4-meter-long alligators due to their destructive power. While he was speaking, a cougar's roar was heard in the distance, unsettling both contestants and the cameraman. They looked at each other in panic, and Ryan let out a swear word. Damn it. There's no need to worry too much. After all, you only talked about how dangerous the alligators are without mentioning the cougar. Where's the cougar's respect? Florida panthers are an endangered species. Not much further, the contestants found a suitable high ground for setting up shelter and many large trees nearby to use for construction. At 4 p.m., thunder roared overhead. They quickly started a fire with a fire starter and then hurried to find leaves to build a roof. Just as they finished the roof, a heavy rain poured down. Don't rush to take shelter. Open your mouth wide to catch and drink the clean rainwater. Save some effort later for boiling it. They spent the first night in disarray due to the rain, which caused the surrounding water level to rise significantly, making it easy for alligators to come closer. At that moment, a 2.5-meter alligator, like a neighbor, came over and said hello. Before the challenge, experts gave both contestants a primitive survival rating. Ryan scored 7.9 due to his Marine Corps experience and expert hunting skills, and Amber scored 7.8. At the beginning of the episode, we knew Amber planned to hunt an alligator. So while Ryan tried to avoid them, Amber suddenly suggested catching and eating one, claiming she wasn't afraid because of her training. Ryan, incredulous, asked her to repeat herself, confirming he heard correctly. Amber indeed intended to kill an alligator, but Ryan refused, pointing out the countless alligators in the swamp. "I won't go on a suicide mission, and neither should you. If you leave, I'll be left to survive alone, and there'll be no one to keep warm at night. If we really must hunt an alligator, let's at least starve for 10 days first." Ryan was right. Such dangerous hunting is unnecessary. However, Amber seemed undeterred, mentioning that she had bathed there just 20 minutes ago, and now alligators were lurking in the water. On the second night, despite the fire, both were attacked by mosquitoes. Amber's legs were covered in large bites. By noon on the third day, Ryan had crafted a spear and stealthily entered the swamp. He targeted a large black fish and speared it decisively, catching a catfish. Ryan's hunting skills were beginning to show. If they could eat fish, there was no need to hunt alligators. On the 9th day, Ryan caught a large snake hidden in the bushes. After eating the snake meat, they used snail shells to boil water. Their survival was going well, with no worries about food or drink. However, as they got comfortable, they became careless, thinking they had adapted to the environment. Amber became irritable from the constant roaring of alligators, which was either to attract mates or to threaten intruders. At such times, vulnerable humans, especially those unclothed, should stay cautious. Yet Amber chose to approach the swamp alone, getting closer to the alligators. She remarked on the beauty of alligators and speculated on the taste of their meat. If you were competing with a female contestant who kept suggesting catching alligators for excitement, would you go? I definitely wouldn't. It's not about being cowardly. In reality, Amber lacked the skills to catch an alligator. She either wanted Ryan to join her or let Ryan catch it, since participating in this show was challenging. Ryan, being cautious, did not recklessly follow Amber into the water. When Amber was about to approach an alligator, she backed out, returning to shore and calling Ryan cowardly on camera. She then told Ryan to overcome his fear of alligators. Ryan quickly responded that he wasn't afraid of alligators. He just didn't want to take needless risks. Ryan was right, and I support his approach. Later, Amber realized her tone was inappropriate and apologized to Ryan, who was not a coward. On the 14th day, Ryan speared another large catfish, and they enjoyed another meal of grilled fish. It seemed like they were on vacation rather than surviving. Just when it seemed they would smoothly complete their 21-day challenge, Amber fell ill. She experienced severe abdominal pain, worsening rapidly. Ryan had to call a doctor who, after an initial examination, took Amber to the hospital for further tests to determine if it was dysentery or another bacterial infection. Amber was forced to leave on day 16. As she left, Ryan gave her a firm kiss on the face. For some reason, I was quite relieved to see Amber go. Otherwise, there might have actually been an accident. She was really too reckless, showing no fear of the crocodiles. After Amber left, I think Ryan's days became more comfortable. We have all witnessed his hunting skills. On day 18, Ryan made himself a small backpack and then crafted a 4-meter-long pole lasso to catch crocodiles. Ryan's change of mind about catching crocodiles wasn't just because he missed Amber. He wanted to prove to Amber and all of us that he was not afraid of crocodiles. Just as Ryan finished making the lasso, there was a splashing sound nearby in the water. Turning around, he saw a small crocodile, an excellent opportunity to catch one. Ryan found a good position, stealthily extended the pole lasso, and tightly secured the crocodile's head, controlling it. Good job, man, you've got something. But the crocodile was quite small, just over a meter long. I got excited for a moment, but a crocodile is a crocodile no matter the size. Just as Ryan was about to finish it off, the crocodile swung its tail and escaped, crawling into the bushes. "Ah, you little thing!" Ryan then showcased his top hunter skills. He charged after the crocodile with a machete and with one chop, collected the crocodile's head. With less than 3 days left in the competition, Ryan, if you can't finish eating, give some to the nearby cameraman. Don't waste food. Ryan also proved with his own skills what a master he is. 2 catfish, 1 snake, and 1 crocodile. His record is undeniable. After eating well and drinking plenty, Ryan carefully headed to the extraction point on day 21. On the way, he was very nervous, fearing revenge from the father of the crocodile he had killed. Fortunately, he completed the challenge without incident. Over these 21 days, Ryan lost 55 pounds, and Amber, who lasted 16 days, lost 22 pounds. Her score dropped from 7.8 to 7.4, while Ryan, with his superior survival skills, saw his score rise from 7.9 to 8.3. Very impressive indeed. Ryan is definitely one of the best on this show and fully capable of opening a wilderness survival school. The first contestant to appear this season was Charlie, a 52-year-old retired Marine now working as a construction worker. His Marine experience greatly enhanced his survival skills, but Charlie's biggest flaw is his stubbornness and tendency to give orders, which could easily lead to conflicts with teammates. Next up is this season's female contestant, Daniel, a 25-year-old blonde. Daniel works as a wilderness paramedic and is a strict vegan, claiming to have been vegetarian for 21 years since the age of 4. It's quite curious how someone could start being vegetarian at 4. Daniel respects all life forms and has never killed any, although I'm skeptical about her never having killed even a mosquito. In the past, some vegetarians have ended up eating meat during the 21-day challenge for health reasons. Will Daniel stick to her principles? Upon arriving at the challenge location, Daniel removed her red and green shirt and stood bare in front of the male contestant. She mentioned that she hates being ordered around. The age gap between 52-year-old Charlie and 25-year-old Daniel could pose some interesting challenges. After some truly awkward conversation, we checked the nearby map. Charlie and Daniel were dropped into the dense jungles of Colombia, where heat and humidity are the least of their worries compared to venomous snakes, poison frogs, and 3-meter-long caimans. On the first day, Charlie kept bragging about his skills as a construction worker. When Daniel heard this, she jokingly asked if he could also build a perfect shelter using bamboo and branches. Charlie sidestepped the question by boasting about his Marine Corps background and jungle survival expertise. Just then, the buzzing of mosquitoes led Charlie to grab some leaves, rub them, and stuff them in his ears, mistakenly thinking he'd found a herbal mosquito repellent. When the topic turned to food, Daniel stated she wouldn't eat any animal with a face, to which Charlie confusedly responded that it equated to eating only plants. Yes, it's manageable to be vegetarian at home, but in the wild, it's hard to sustain on plants alone. Before the challenge, experts rated both contestants on primitive skills. Daniel, despite her paramedic skills, was limited by her strict vegetarian diet, scoring 6.9. Charlie, with decades of military training but a penchant for reckless adventures, scored 7.2. While moving forward, Charlie caught an animal easily. Daniel, who refuses to kill, saw it and suggested, "We're not hungry right now, and it's so cute. Let's release it. We haven't found shelter or made fire yet, and those are more important." Eventually, Charlie released it. "Don't blame Daniel, especially for endangered species," someone said. At 1 p.m., they found a spot suitable for building a shelter and soon discovered a bamboo grove. Charlie then started to show his tough style, vigorously chopping the bamboo with a machete, insisting on working alone until he cramped his hand. The first day went smoothly. They started a fire and used bamboo as containers to boil water. However, early the next morning while sharpening his knife, Charlie cut his finger deeply, bleeding profusely. Daniel, a wilderness paramedic, could have helped treat the wound, such as using leaves for a simple dressing, but tough Charlie refused. He belittled the need for dressing, saying, "What's this? Just a scratch and some blood. I despise how today's young men can't handle minor cuts. A man should act like a man." Despite Daniel's good intentions, Charlie refused her help to clean the wound, stating, "A real man can resist bacterial infections." Their disagreement over this was unnecessary and showed Charlie's stubbornness. Yet, Charlie did care for others, handling the harder tasks and even relighting the fire at midnight. In the following days, they split up to find food. Charlie sought meat, while Daniel stuck to plants. Fortunately, they found mangoes. When Daniel became weak from hunger, Charlie climbed trees to pick mangoes for her. On the 6th day, Charlie found some river snails and immediately grilled them by the fire. Watching the snails being roasted, Daniel felt as if she could sense their pain and said, "They are alive, living beings." She believes there is no need to take an animal's life just to satisfy hunger. It seemed clear that Daniel would not eat meat during the 21-day challenge. Although she didn't stop Charlie from eating, she hoped he would release some of the snails. Out of respect for Daniel, Charlie complied. On day 9, while chopping bamboo, tough guy Charlie cut his finger again, deeper this time. "You're not young anymore. Can't you be more careful?" Working recklessly doesn't prove you're a man. No one would criticize you for slowing down. Despite this, Charlie refused Daniel's offer to treat the wound. However, given the severity of the injury, Daniel, a professional medic, insisted on treating it and carefully dressed the wound. Over the next few days, Charlie set several traps for food but caught nothing. By day 18, he was extremely weak and lying in the shelter. Daniel, not wanting to give up on the challenge, went to the riverbank and, for the first time in her life, killed a toad to feed Charlie. While she maintained her no-meat stance, she took a difficult step for her teammate. Charlie was deeply moved by her action, and their mutual care helped them endure. The final task was evacuation. Charlie and Daniel built a bamboo raft and headed to the coast in heavy rain. Due to shallow coral reefs and heavy waves, the rescue boat anchored 180 meters from the shore. The contestants had to swim through rough waves to reach the boat, a challenging end to their journey, deserving extra points from the experts. They successfully boarded the rescue boat, completing the 21-day challenge. Charlie lost 22 kilograms and Daniel 12 kilograms. Charlie's score increased from 7.2 to 7.5 and Daniel's from 6.9 to 7.5. I've often wondered if any contestant joins the challenge to make friends, treating it like a special date. In previous shows, contestants were usually married or in a relationship. However, in today's episode, both contestants are longtime singles. At the start, the female contestant said to the camera, "I think we have a chance." How will their relationship evolve, and will they succeed in the challenge? Let's find out in today's episode. Before introducing our two contestants, let's first look at the location for this episode. The challenge takes place in the Bayano jungle, located in the heart of Panama's rainforest. This wild, primitive environment is known for its relentless storms, dense vegetation harboring jaguars and mountain lions, and is home to hundreds of venomous snakes. Entrance into this jungle is only possible on horseback. Making a grand entrance on horseback is Jeff, this episode's male contestant. A 26-year-old retired Marine, Jeff lives by several philosophies, one being, pain is weakness leaving the body. Known for his survival skills, Jeff asserts that he will not quit unless he is physically carried out on a stretcher. Despite being a capable loner who dislikes disturbances, Jeff's teamwork might be challenging as he prefers solitude. His initial survival rating is 7.5. Next, we meet Melissa, the 34-year-old lively and upbeat female contestant. Her optimistic and proactive nature, along with her talkative personality, can be crucial in wilderness survival. However, Melissa lacks experience in extreme environments, reflected in her initial survival rating of 5.8. Upon arriving at the challenge site, the contestants meet for the first time, with each allowed to bring one piece of personal equipment. The production team provides essentials like a machete, flint, and a cooking pot. Melissa immediately notices Jeff's striking blue eyes and good build, mentioning her long-standing single status, and pondering the possibilities with Jeff. On the first day, as they navigate the dense jungle, the normally shy contestants are quiet, unsure of what to say. Melissa, being more outgoing, dominates the conversation, while Jeff, preferring solitude, seems like a shy young man. Despite his earlier declaration of disliking disturbances, it's uncertain how he will react to his talkative partner. After wandering through the jungle, they find a clearing next to a stream to set up shelter. Jeff starts cutting trees without a word. Observing his introverted nature, Melissa tells the camera, he'll eventually let his guard down. Despite her attempts to engage him in conversation and humor, Jeff remains unresponsive and even shows signs of annoyance, struggling with normal social interactions. At 3 in the afternoon, the shelter was preliminarily set up. As they were about to start a fire, thunder roared and rain began to fall. They hurried to light the fire for warmth later that night. Jeff struggled with the flint in front of the tinder for a long time, sparking without igniting. Frustrated, Jeff started hitting the flint harder, which was clearly the wrong way to use it. "Brother, you won't start a fire that way," Melissa said. "Why are you getting so irritated?" As Jeff became confused, Melissa pointed out that the sparks from the machete had almost started a fire, but it went out, and the flint even broke. In frustration, Jeff threw the flint away and walked into the nearby bushes, declaring despairingly, "I told you I can't last until day 15 without fire." Melissa calmly suggested, Now that the rain has eased a bit, let's go out and gather some dry branches and leaves, and then encourage Jeff to try again. Jeff, touching the tinder Melissa gathered, muttered about its poor quality. However, using this tinder, they successfully started a fire. It was as if a pair of hands were metaphorically slapping Jeff's face for underestimating others who do things right but still finding faults. After starting the fire, they could use the pot to boil water. On the first night, Jeff and Melissa were asleep when they heard strange noises nearby. With many wild animals around, the noises scared them immensely. The next day, they were awakened by a loud thunderclap as heavy rain soaked the rainforest. The damp conditions plunged Jeff into a pessimistic mood, which could eventually affect Melissa. By the fourth day, when the rain finally stopped, Melissa and Jeff, who hadn't eaten for 4 days, went looking for food. While Jeff was chopping wood, Melissa caught a turtle by the river. Indeed, catching a turtle in such conditions was a stroke of luck. After their meal, Melissa tried to share interesting stories to boost morale, but Jeff was annoyed by her constant chatter. Melissa tried to cheer him up with jokes, like joking about being bitten by mosquitoes because her blood was sweet, calling herself a southern sweetheart. Though the joke might sound corny, Melissa made it work. At night, the argument between them finally started. What was the issue? Jeff found Melissa annoying and chose to sleep far away from her, not allowing her to come any closer. Underneath Melissa, a log made her sleep uncomfortable, so she shifted her head slightly closer. Seeing this, Jeff sternly asked her to move her head back. Melissa patiently explained that the log was making it uncomfortable to sleep. Jeff coldly responded, "What does that have to do with me?" Naturally, an argument ensued. On the 5th day, Jeff remembered the turtle meat they had eaten the day before and apologized to Melissa for his rudeness. After apologizing, he continued, "We're probably just not meant to be friends. Our personalities don't match. You're the type of girl I'd avoid." He thought he was attractive, but in reality, he was just being foolish. It's unclear how Jeff fares with women in real life, but his communication skills definitely make relationships challenging. Melissa decided not to initiate conversation or jokes anymore. Despite being survival partners, if they couldn't even manage that, all of Melissa's plans and suggestions were opposed by Jeff, giving no regard to her feelings. Both harbored resentment, especially Jeff, who seemed to want to quit and leave the place. Over the following days, their relationship eased slightly, working together on traps and foraging. However, the fundamental issues remained unresolved. On the 12th day, they argued over firewood, which Jeff took very poorly. Melissa tried to calm the situation, but Jeff bluntly told her to leave. Melissa was furious and yelled back. By the 14th day, Jeff approached the production team and announced his withdrawal from the competition. The show's producer felt it was a pity for him to quit at that point and tried to persuade him to reconsider. However, Jeff, crying, was determined to leave, feeling defeated by the jungle. Jeff's departure was probably for the best for Melissa. If two people cannot get along, it might be better alone. In the final 7 days, Melissa embraced true wilderness survival, foraging and making fishing traps. The food she gathered each day was not much but enough to sustain her. On the 18th day, a heavy rain began again, and floodwaters started to gather around her. Melissa's position was likely to be flooded, which would make her final evacuation very challenging. The heavy rain continued until the early morning of the 21st day. After getting up, Melissa began her evacuation. She made herself a pair of grass shoes. The entire evacuation route took Melissa deep into the jungle, where she could encounter jaguars or mountain lions at any time. On this short retreat route, Melissa nearly failed the challenge due to getting lost. Fortunately, she arrived at the rescue point without harm and boarded the rescue vehicle. Over these 21 days, Melissa lost 23 kilograms. Her primitive skills score increased from 5.8 to 6.9. Jeff, on the other hand, due to his early exit and poor performance, saw his score drop from 7.5 to 5.2. The first contestant to appear this season is 29-year-old Downey. Downey knows basic wilderness survival skills and can flexibly use the resources around her. Downey said she was abandoned by her parents and homeless at 16. Now, she is a single mother raising her daughter alone, who is her everything. From Downey's eyes, one can see the strength forged through great misfortune, which is very important in wilderness survival. Downey's initial survival score is 7.2. Next is 28-year-old male contestant Julio. Julio claims to have a positive and optimistic attitude, but that's just nonsense. Let's see how he contradicts himself later. Julio's initial survival score is 7.4. Upon arriving at the challenge location, the contestants begin by disrobing. Downey expressed discomfort with nudity, but it's part of the challenge. Julio, on the other hand, didn't mind and said, "I love my wife very much. I hope she has a husband because I'm here to survive, not to play." Whenever I hear male contestants say this, it annoys me, as if female contestants are just here to see nudity. Let's not rush to judge. Let's see your capabilities. After the two meet, let's look at the challenge location. Downey and Julio were sent to the hot swampy area of the Seminole Jungle in Central Florida. Over 200 years ago, the Seminole Indian tribe settled in this challenging wilderness. Here, 4-meter-long alligators, deadly rattlesnakes, and 200-kilogram black bears inhabit the area, attacking any intruders. The rainy season has started, significantly increasing the number of giant mosquitoes, which are 20 times larger than regular mosquitoes. The two contestants are indeed suffering today. On the first day, while looking for shelter, Julio frequently stopped to admire the venomous spiders in the bushes, as he keeps one at home and isn't afraid of them. But Downey is terrified. However, Julio has his own fears. He is terrified of small dogs, like chihuahuas, and it's a fear he cannot overcome. This fear's origin is unknown, as Julio hasn't shared it. Soon, Downey and Julio found a river, which allowed them to settle nearby. Of course, one cannot be careless at this time. Be wary of your friendly neighbors, the crocodiles. Florida is home to some of the largest and most aggressive crocodiles in the U.S., which claim more lives annually than sharks. After cautiously crossing the river, the two contestants set up a shelter near a few trees. They successfully started a fire after building the shelter, starting off smoothly. However, their calm was disrupted at night. Downey spotted a pair of glowing eyes in the darkness. Unable to discern the creature, they spent the night in fear. Black bears here are notorious. The next day, surrounded by many dangerous animals, Julio had not yet found food when he came across a small snake. Unfazed, he killed the snake with a stick, which also contained 4 snake eggs. Downey, after eating one, said it tasted just like a boiled chicken egg. After finishing the eggs, they shared the snake meat. Though small, the snake provided them a meal. In the afternoon, it started to rain heavily. Their neglect of the fire led to it being extinguished, and reigniting it in the heavy rain was not easy. Even sleeping by the fire last night was freezing, and without a fire tonight, they would be shivering. The body burns 4 times more fat when shivering, quickly depleting their energy. The cold is only part of the challenge in the wild. Not to forget the giant mosquitoes, which are 20 times larger than normal mosquitoes. Julio, who slept less than 2 hours, woke up disoriented and took a bath in the water. At this point, he began to question his choice, wondering why he was suffering here instead of enjoying a comfortable life at home. Julio seemed to forget that he was in a challenge, but it wasn't just the harsh environment that broke him. What devastated him the most was taking life. Although he hadn't caught any large prey, the moment he caught a small lizard, the thought of taking this cute animal's life for his survival overwhelmed him, and he broke down crying on camera. Truly an emotional man, though perhaps overly so. After this breakdown, Julio began to decline. Julio and Downey each ate half of the small lizard, and Julio's expression turned to pain as he ate. Then he started to feel sick and vomited. I'm not sure if it was the taste or his guilt over killing that disgusted him. Julio's sudden strange behavior worried Downey, wondering how this talkative and brave man from yesterday had become so withdrawn. On the 4th day, Julio's mental state rapidly deteriorated, as if he had suffered a severe blow. Concerned that Julio might quit early, Downey took on the responsibility of finding food. With limited hunting skills, she went to the river and caught only a few very small fish. While attempting to find more food in the river, Downey saw a large dark shadow underwater and quickly returned to shore, narrowly escaping a crocodile attack. The small fish Downey collected were so tiny, they felt like swallowing pills. Julio refused to eat any of it, seemingly fasting. Julio claimed he wasn't hungry, clearly a lie since Downey was starving, and he must have been hungry too. Julio's condition worsened. He expressed feeling very confused and seeing the world as dark without any light. His next statement alarmed everyone. Julio mentioned having thoughts of harming himself and others. Concerned, the production team removed Julio for Downey's safety. When Julio left, Downey said, "This is about the 7th or 8th time I've been abandoned. I'm used to it. I've always relied on myself here, so I can survive alone. I'm just angry at him. People like him have ruined my life." Although I don't know Downey's past, being abandoned by her parents at 16 and being a single mother shows she has faced much misfortune. Yet she stands bravely in the wilderness, proving she can manage alone. She is strong and has a daughter, for whom she wants to demonstrate how strong an ordinary woman can be. Julio left on the 5th day, leaving Downey to survive the remaining 16 days alone. Despite her independence and strength, these alone are not enough in harsh conditions. Downey suffered numerous bites from large mosquitoes. On the 8th day, while searching for food, Downey saw an otter leave a fish on the shore. She quickly took the fish as the otter returned to the river, which seemed very upset. Nature is like this. It's the law of survival, Downey reasoned, justifying taking the fish due to her hunger. However, hunger was not Downey's biggest problem. On the 16th day, while resting in her shelter, a black bear came close. The proximity was frightening, and with no weapons, Downey was terrified. She heard the bear's growls at night and dared not move, curling up and praying. In the last days of the challenge, she lived in constant fear of the bear and dared not go out for food. During this time, her shelter also burned down due to an unattended fire, destroying everything. By day 19, Downey could have simply slept on the ground. However, knowing her daughter might watch the show, she didn't want her to see her in such difficult circumstances. Despite her exhaustion, she at least wanted to create a shelter and maintain her dignity until day 21. After persevering to the 21st day, all that was left was to evacuate. With strong willpower, Downey reached the rescue point under the watchful eyes of crocodiles and snakes and boarded the rescue vehicle. Over these 21 days, Downey lost 42 pounds, demonstrating remarkable willpower and resilience. Her score increased from 7.2 to 7.9, making her an elite survival expert. As for Julio, who quit after 5 days, his score dropped from 7.4 to 4.1. Located on a rugged coastline, this area basks in the scorching sun of the Caribbean. Sharp coral reefs and deadly sea snakes present a primeval environment where only ancient Maya had settled before now. However, new adventurers have arrived. Luke, a 35-year-old self-taught extreme adventurer from California, whose greatest strength is his confidence, and Alyssa, a 27-year-old upbeat youth counselor from New Hampshire, equipped with deep survival skills. Prior to departure, experts assessed their primitive survival skills, rating Luke with a PSR, primitive survival rating, of 6.8 due to his extensive study but lack of long-term survival application. Alyssa, with years of practical experience, received a PSR of 7.1, although her passive nature could hinder her knowledge application. Meeting on the beach, Luke and Alyssa briefly got to know each other and chose their survival tools. Alyssa picked an axe, and Luke chose a pot for cooking and boiling water. They observed the map and planned to head north across 4.8 kilometers of rugged beach to build a camp at the edge of a dense jungle near the only reliable drinking water source, a natural well frequented by crocodiles. The heat was intense, likened to being in a furnace. Luke quickly chose a campsite and started building a wind-resistant and warm shelter, a time-consuming task. They spent a challenging night and continued work under the sun the next day. To avoid dehydration, they sought the nearby natural well. The first pond they found, formed by a limestone bed collapse, contained water of very poor quality with high sulfur content, which could cause severe health issues if consumed. Luke fetched a pot of water but knew they couldn't drink it directly. Their next goal was to start a fire. Without lighters, they tried the primitive method of fire starting by friction, but neither Luke's efforts nor Alyssa's bow drill technique succeeded, leading to frustration. Unable to start a fire, they decided to make a water filter. They found a bamboo stick, which Luke filled with sand and charcoal they collected. These natural materials acted as filters, potentially removing most pollutants and bacteria from the well water. The filtered water turned out clean and odorless. With ongoing difficulties in starting a fire, this makeshift filtration device would likely be in use until the end of their challenge. After hydrating, Alyssa found a crab on the beach. Unfortunately, they couldn't eat it without fire. For now, the best option for protein was raw sea snails. To meet their daily caloric needs, they had to stomach 65 sea snails each day. On day 6, Luke planned to explore the jungle for food, and Alyssa agreed. They went to wash up in the water but quickly retreated after spotting a crocodile nearby, which nearly scared them witless. Luke decided to focus on making fire. He built a more complex bow drill, but it broke quickly due to its impractical design. By day 8, Luke found a new item while scavenging, a glass bottle bottom, which could help start a fire using the principle of a magnifying glass. Alyssa didn't oppose his new attempt, but to be safe, she continued making cord for a bow drill. Ultimately, both methods failed. If the weather stayed clear, the lack of fire wouldn't be a huge problem. However, a storm was brewing, making their situation without warmth even more difficult. Heavy rain fell, and inside their shelter, they made a final attempt to start a fire. Thankfully, they succeeded this time. A small piece of glowing charcoal was placed into some tinder, and the flames finally appeared. With fire secured, they could start hunting and cooking their food, feeling rejuvenated. The only annoyance was the insects, which weren't deterred by the fire, disrupting their rest. Frustrated, Luke cursed without caring if it would be televised. On day 11, Luke built a trap for iguanas using tree trunks and ropes, with a coconut as bait. Alyssa, skilled with her hands, made a fishing basket. After doing all they could, they left the rest to fate. 2 days later, Luke watched helplessly as an iguana bypassed his trap, and Alyssa's fishing basket caught nothing. Over the next few days, they kept improving and creating new traps for catching iguanas, birds, and fish, trying everything they could think of. By day 16, both were so weak they barely moved. If their traps caught nothing, they were doomed. The fishing basket was still empty, and Luke's traps were ineffective, pushing him to the brink of collapse. Alyssa hadn't given up. She comforted Luke while devising a plan. She proposed weaving dried palm leaves to catch crabs, nocturnal animals that could provide thousands of calories. However, hunting at night was risky. Near the ocean, the rocks were very sharp, and it was easy to get cut without lighting. But to survive, they had no choice. Alyssa's dried palm leaves served as torches, but they burned quickly, limiting their crabbing time. Just as they started, the fire went out. Luke and Alyssa were extremely weak, hundreds of meters from camp. Even returning with crabs was a problem. So, they decided not to return. Using the faint light from the camera, Alyssa chose to keep going. Her persistence paid off as she caught 2 crabs, giving them hope. They hurried back to camp, eager to cook and eat the crabs, not minding the risk of burns. Luke sincerely praised Alyssa as their savior. Over many episodes, they were the most harmonious pair. On day 21, after eating the last of their sea snails and packing, they prepared to leave. To reach the extraction point on time, Luke and Alyssa had to hurry, with their destination about 9.6 kilometers away, across from 2 small rocky islands by the shore. The direct route was through the jungle. They had only 8 hours. Exceeding this meant failure. The jungle was difficult to navigate, described as through fire and blades, with blazing sunlight above and thorns cutting like blades below. The dense foliage made it hard to see and keep direction. Luke was uncertain of finding a way out, but relied on Alyssa's leadership. "Just move forward and leave the rest to fate," she said. But fate wasn't on their side. They exited the jungle but were 3 kilometers south of the extraction zone. They continued, and with minutes to spare, the rocky islands appeared. The rescue vehicle arrived just in time, marking their challenge a success. The 3-week challenge tested their physical stamina. Alyssa and Luke lost 6.3 and 9.5 kilograms, respectively. In the final PSR assessment, Alyssa's focus and positive attitude boosted her score from 7.1 to 7.8. Despite difficulties and frustration, Luke persevered, raising his score from 6.8 to 7.2. Located at 4 degrees south latitude, the Amazon rainforest is the most biodiverse place on Earth. In its lakes lurk caimans, anacondas, and piranhas. The ground is home to 2 million species of insects. However, the biggest survival threat is the torrential rain that turns the forest floor into mud. This is the ancient land of the Amazon, a place daunting to humans. Yet, some people deliberately seek challenges in such daunting places. Jake, 36, from Maryland, has always loved the outdoors and is confident in his hunting skills. His extensive experience in outdoor activities makes him well-suited for this challenge, though his arrogance might strain team dynamics. His initial PSR is 7.3. Jamie, also 36, from Arizona, is petite but loves adventure. She appears in mountain biking races and cross-country running and teaches youth wilderness survival skills. Licensed in wilderness first aid, Jamie has managed various wilderness crises as a wilderness therapy instructor and EMT. However, her indecisiveness and self-doubt may hinder her success, starting her off with a PSR of 6. The production team provided both Jake and Jamie with a magnesium fire starter and allowed each to bring one survival item: Jake's machete and Jamie's recurve knife, marking the first time both brought knives. The map indicated that to survive, they must leave the predator-filled lowlands and muddy marshes and venture several miles into the jungle to find dry ground. The Amazon rainforest is extremely unfriendly to humans, making just traveling through it a significant challenge. Passing a giant kapok tree, Jamie suggested setting up camp nearby, a point Jake agreed on. The jungle provided ample materials for building a camp, and their knives helped them quickly gather what they needed. Unfortunately, they were pressed for time and only managed a basic shelter by night, which hardly protected them from mosquito attacks, leading to a sleepless night. They started improving their shelter early the next morning, relying on the kapok tree for a sense of security. Next, they needed to secure drinking water by collecting it from a nearby river using fruit shells. Jake also caught some grasshoppers along the way. Fire making was crucial, and they initially thought using magnesium powder with cotton from the trees would easily start a fire. However, a sudden downpour foiled their plans, leaving them without fire. Luckily, the rain provided drinking water, but without a fire, surviving the cold nights was nearly unbearable. The inability to start a fire right away was a major mistake for the duo. Jamie, tormented by the ordeal, broke down crying and expressed a desire to go home, a situation that deeply concerned Jake. If she decides to quit, it would significantly impact Jake's survival. Therefore, he tries to improve the camp to keep out mosquitoes and rain and maintain warmth. This effort is somewhat successful. The rain does not penetrate the shelter at night. However, Jamie's condition remains poor. Jake continues to focus on improving their shelter, eager to conquer the Amazon rainforest. But Jamie doesn't contribute. She is unwilling to work in the rain. It seems difficult for Jake to achieve this goal alone. This situation must change. Jamie stays in the shelter, doing nothing because she fears the cold. Jake handles all the tasks alone, questioning why she came if she only adds to his burden. Jamie feels it's too cold to do anything and prefers staying still in the tent. She might as well have stayed home and enjoyed comfort. Jake disagrees with this attitude. He quickly adjusts his emotions, urging not to let a negative attitude affect others. After their talk, Jamie finally starts working outside for the first time in 9 days, which makes Jake very happy. This is the right attitude for survival. The shelter is nearly complete. Next, they need to solve the food problem. Jamie makes a fish trap with branches to try her luck, while Jake sets traps on land. Afterward, he spends considerable effort cutting down a palm tree, whose heart is edible and tastes much better than wriggling larvae. With the weather clearing up, they must hurry to make a fire after dining. Otherwise, even if they catch animals, it would be pointless. Over the days, the duo has stored plenty of firewood and dried tinder in the sun. Jake easily starts a fire this time, thanks to the long-term effort. With the security of both the fire and the shelter, Jake decides to venture out for night hunting. There are 2 reasons. Clear skies are rare, and most animals here are nocturnal. However, lacking a proper light source, relying only on the weak light from the camera, the night hunting fails. The traps they set on both land and water catch nothing. Unfortunately, heavy rain returns, trapping Jake and Jamie in the shelter for over 4 days, preventing them from gathering more food. Several days without adequate protein intake cause Jake to faint several times. They need to build a raft to reach the extraction point, but they lack the strength. Bamboo, ideal for rafts, is also hard to find. The situation is dire. Low blood sugar from lack of food causes Jake to become increasingly dizzy and confused, worsening his mental state in a terrifying way. Now it's Jamie's turn to help them through this phase. The simplest solution is to find food. Jamie searches a bit away from the camp and makes a delightful discovery after walking for a while. Delicious wax apples. This find makes both of them very happy, and Jake even laughs out loud with excitement. The tree is laden with wax apples, enough to fill them up. Next, they need to build a raft. On the 20th day, Jake finds wood that can substitute for bamboo and float on water. After crafting the raft and placing it in the water, they discover it is full of ants and spiders. They quickly return to shore to clean it and decide to roast the spiders for food. On the 21st day, the pair consults the map. As they paddle through the maze of warm lakes in the Amazon, they must avoid tangled spider webs and predators lurking beneath the water to reach the Amazon River estuary. The swamp is teeming with piranhas and anacondas, but fortunately, they don't attack the raft. Nearly exhausted, they finally reach the estuary and see the rescue boat. The moment they board feels like a rebirth. Jake remarks that if the Amazon were a person, she would be a sexy and beautiful foreign woman, but once you truly know her, you realize she is definitely a bitch. After 21 days in the Amazon, Jake loses nearly 20% of his body weight, about 17 kilo. Despite deteriorating health and a loss of patience, he never stops working. As a result, his PSR, primitive survival rating, increases from 7.3 to 8.0. Jamie loses about 9 kilos. Although heavy rain and hunger nearly break her spirit, with her partner's help, she rebounds and collects their key food source. Her PSR increases from 6.0 to 6.7. In northeastern Croatia, near the Danube River, lies the wild wetlands of Kopački Rit, filled with lakes, marshes, and riverine forests, home to hundreds of species of mosquitoes. During the day, wild boars with sharp tusks fend off intruders into their shady forests. At night, golden jackals, the largest of the jackals, hunt in packs, ambushing unsuspecting prey. Why would anyone come to such a place? The reason is simple: to challenge the limits. Lee, 33, from Australia, teaches wilderness survival skills and environmental rewilding. His knowledge of wilderness survival and primitive skills makes his survivalist resume quite impressive. However, the real challenge will be whether he can adapt to the unfamiliar environment. His primitive survival rating is 7.6. Stacy, 35, from Idaho, is a field data collector. Her willpower and determination are unmatched, but her resilient and independent personality may not be advantageous in challenges that require teamwork. Her primitive survival rating is 6.2. Stacy's first impression of Lee is that he somewhat resembles a Viking warrior, very wild. Besides traditional fire-starting tools, Lee and Stacy can each bring a survival tool, a kukri and a pot. The map guides them to head downstream to a suitable camping spot near the river. With the hot weather, they cover themselves in mud for sun protection. By noon, the temperature reaches 42 degrees Celsius, causing them to lose about 4 liters of water per hour. Dehydration becomes their biggest challenge, so they must not spend too much time traveling. Finally, they find the river, which is not very clear, but it's abundant with fish, making it a good place to settle. The first task is to make fire for boiling water. Lee is skilled in fire starting, but for some reason it fails here, leaving his palms raw without a spark. After resting and regrouping, Lee proposes the next steps. Make a basket from hogweed to cover their faces from mosquitoes, and cover their bodies with sand to spend the night. They decide to set aside the issues of water and fire for now, which turns out to be a poor decision. The sounds of animals at night and the overwhelming mosquitoes make it impossible to sleep without a tent. They endure the long night and quickly address the drinking water issue at dawn. If they don't hydrate within 48 hours, their organs could fail. They take turns drilling wood to start a fire, which is successful this time. By 10:30 the next morning, Stacy drinks her first sip of hot water since arriving, feeling revitalized. After hydrating, Lee decides to catch some fish. Although no big fish bite, a small one is enough for a meal. He places the pot on the fire to boil water while Stacy rests. Lee goes to gather more firewood, but an accident occurs. The iron pot tips over from the fire, pouring boiling water on Stacy's back. Hearing her screams, the medical team quickly arrives. Such severe burns require immediate treatment, initially assessed as 3rd degree. Infection could be life-threatening. Despite immense pain, Stacy chooses to stay and complete the challenge. Upon seeing his partner return, Lee is first surprised, then overwhelmed with emotion and guilt. feeling responsible for not taking better care of Stacy. The burn requires Stacy to rest adequately and maintain proper nutrition, or else she might have to leave. Lee finds a large fish in the trap, not lively, but with flesh that smells fresh. The trap likely affected the fish's gill function, but it is still edible, which is undoubtedly good news for Stacy. A large pot of fish meat and soup greatly comforted both their bodies and spirits. However, at night, Stacy's wound became increasingly painful due to its inability to stay clean. To prevent infection, she chewed up plants and applied them to the inflamed wound. By the 8th day, the pain was unbearable, and she had to call the medical team for a wound check. The examination revealed a severe infection, necessitating her departure to a hospital for treatment. Staying in a clean environment was crucial. Otherwise, bacteria from the wound could enter her bloodstream, spread throughout her body, cause shock, and potentially lead to death. Continuing the challenge under these conditions was no longer a wise choice. Tearfully, Stacy said goodbye to Lee, who comforted her as best as he could. Given his partner's strong desire to succeed, Lee resolved to complete the challenge for both of them. The feeling of loneliness was excruciating. It might have been manageable if he had been alone from the start, but losing a partner who had shared every step was almost unbearable. To avoid dwelling on these feelings, Lee kept himself busy. After failing to catch fish by hand in the river, he attempted to catch frogs along the shore. However, these small creatures were surprisingly fast, and once again, he returned empty-handed. Lee has eaten very little for the past 12 days. His physical condition quickly deteriorated due to a lack of essential proteins and fats. His brain is depleting its own cells, leading to states of agitation and depression. Reduced conversations with Stacy made time feel much slower. He barely made it to day 16, with his mental state severely declined, nothing to look forward to, and unsure of what to do next. He began to have repetitive thoughts. On day 18, Lee felt an inexplicable deep sadness, crying bitterly, but still facing prolonged loneliness. By day 20, Lee's emotions were relieved. He woke up feeling much at peace, as if a great burden had been lifted, like clearing the major channels in his body. On day 21, as the sun rose, Lee headed towards the extraction point. Entering the jungle below the canopy, the lack of sunlight dropped the temperature to a cold 14 degrees Celsius. Weak and malnourished, Lee was likely to suffer from hypothermia. He understood this and tried to exit the forest quickly, using deep breaths to boost metabolism and slight movements to raise his body temperature, stopping intermittently. With remarkable physical endurance and willpower, Lee finally reached the river at the extraction point. However, the shallow rocky waters prevented the rescue boat from docking. He had to swim into deeper waters to be rescued. The cold water reduced his body temperature 25 times faster than the cold air. If Lee's body temperature dropped too low, he could lose consciousness and drown. Fortunately, this did not happen, and the rescue boat arrived before he collapsed. Carrying Stacy's determination, Lee successfully completed the 21-day challenge in Kapachere, consuming very little protein and losing 8 kilograms. He demonstrated ingenuity and strong willpower, raising his PSR from 7.6 to 8.4. Stacy, who only spent 8 days in the swamp, lost 2 kilograms. She showed great courage and determination, returning to the challenge despite severe third-degree burns, and her score remained unchanged at 6.2.